Hi, I'm John Toomey from the Global Wellness Institute's Workplace Wellbeing Initiative, and welcome to another presentation of our Real Talk series. In this episode, we're exploring mental health in the workplace. And when we first started to look at this topic, we wondered how we could create something that would be a usable and relevant resource for managers, leaders, supervisors, and small business owners. And we realized that one area that wasn't really being covered very well was the voice of the employee. So we set about interviewing employees from across the globe and asking them specific questions to gain their perspectives on how organizations, how leaders, how managers can better go about making a psychologically safe workplace. So tune in now and join myself and my initiative teammates, Jessica Grossmere, Melissa Walker, Jocelyn Pepe, and Julie Stiles, as we explore these questions with our guests. And we hope that you'll be able to take something away from this that will be helpful to you as you seek to better manage the people in your workplaces. So welcome to our talk.
I think that a company really needs to take a look at the entire person, a whole, human-centered approach and a holistic approach to well-being. Not just looking at data and numbers and number of benefits that are available to employees, which are great. That's a wonderful thing to have. Benefits are important. But I think it's really getting to the person as the employee and what their needs are, especially in a post-pandemic workforce and work world that we're in. We're more siloed, we're more separate, we're isolated in some ways, but more connected in some ways too. And so there's opportunities that that companies can really leverage and kind of enhance based on this disconnected but virtually connected world that we're all in. And so really paying attention to that. How can you still create human connection? How can you understand what your employees' needs are in a virtual workspace or hybrid? Just thinking about the whole person with what their well-being looks like. Is there a commute? Do they have childcare needs? Kind of deeper level thinking on what employee benefits and well-being looks like, and really listening to those needs and acting on them. Making them actionable. And I think there's a lot of wiggle room and opportunity to do that without, breaking a budget or costing a lot of money to offer those opportunities to your employees. I think there's lots of ways to do that that don't cost anything, that can still enhance engagement and enhance feelings of connectedness on a human level. And that's not always leveraged by large or small companies. So I think that's something that I've really valued in my past work experiences, those opportunities that really find ways to make people feel seen and heard as humans and not just as employees.
I think a lot of transparency is good, and I mean that in the spirit of feedback. I've worked in organizations where I got a lot of good feedback about things I was doing right, things that could be improved, and also very clear upfront expectations about, what is expected to be done or how it needs to be done. I think it supported my mental health to get a lot of direction about, I don't want to repeat anything, but like direction about, here's what, like I had a boss that I worked for who was like, here's exactly what I want, and here's exactly how I think we should get it. Or I don't know how to get it, and can you help? I've worked in organizations in the past where they, I've been asked to do something as if it is doable or knowledgeable on how to get it done, only to find out after, hours or days or weeks of toil that no one knew how to get it done. So I have been supported positively in the past by, a boss who says, hey, I would like to make this happen. I don't know how to get it done. No one knows how to get it done. Could you please take your best stab at it? So that at least is very clear upfront expectation, because it helps me not second guess myself and like, am I doing this right? Is there a right way to do it? Are they gonna be disappointed? Like, it all affects your mental health. So that's one way that I've been supported in terms of my mental health. I'm just trying to think broadly, just other aspects. I think it actually helps to get to know your coworkers, and not just like have a beer with them, but like, and not just team building exercises. Those can get way over structured and you actually didn't get to know someone. So just going the extra step about learning about like maybe how they do what they do or why, and why they enjoy it and things like that. It helps build like a team, mentality. So I'm just trying to think if there's any other aspects.
I can give a recent example of that. I had an interaction with a team member that actually became quite uncomfortable. And I reached out to my immediate supervisor and said, hey, I need your help. This is starting to be a hostile workplace for me. I was recognizing signs in my person that I was not feeling okay. I tend to be more on the sensitive side, and I realized that different people have different comfort levels. So I did acknowledge that to my supervisor and said, I realize I'm more sensitive than most, but I'm reaching my limits. And his immediate response was, if we're talking about limits, then it's time to take action. So just in that moment of me reaching out, not really in crisis, but definitely out of significant discomfort, I was met with, I hear you, I've got your back. So I think those are some really key behaviors that are necessary, is when someone does reach out in a state of not being okay, whether it's crisis or something else, that they need to be heard and believed and responded to with, we're going to take steps to correct this.
I think it really starts before an employee even joins an organization. I think when an organization really supports their employees' mental health and well-being, they are looking in the interview stage for somebody who shares their values. Because I think that mental health and wellness, especially at work, can mean different things to different people. Some people may want the opportunity to just grind themselves to the bone, work as hard as they can, and be rewarded appropriately. And that could be entirely different from someone who wants to work hard during a set amount of hours and then have time to enjoy with their family in the evenings, be respected on the weekends, not bothered. And those two employees can both bring a ton of value to an organization, but they're very different. So they might be different than what the company is looking for. So I think if a company can meet with a potential candidate and really understand, is this going to be a good fit? Do our values align? That is the first step. And second of all, I think, being true to those values once the employee does join the organization and keeping promises that were made up front is really, really important. I think that a lot of times companies love to talk about their culture during the interview stage, and then the candidate, once they join the company, finds out that the things that were mentioned in that initial interview or first few interviews just aren't real. And they sound great in theory, but they're not being put into practice. So I think if companies take that a little bit more seriously and really, really live by those values, they are going to develop a stronger relationship with their employees. And it's a relationship that's going to be built on trust from day one.
You feel very safe to be yourself, be authentic. And I find to be very much more, excuse my poor grammar, but I'm much more productive when I feel safe in an environment because I'm supported. And there's no judgment, there's no critique, there's no worry that I'm going to be, put in a position where, there's a time crunch, and a lot of times you feel these impositions that we create for ourselves that really aren't coming from our leaders, but you wouldn't know that because you don't feel safe enough to trust that your leaders have your mental health and your mental wellness, your mental stability at heart. But when they do, there's a level of safety that allows you to be authentic and to take risks and ultimately to be super productive, is how I felt. That's a very good question. It's such an organic thing from my experience with so many of my leaders, that you just know it right off the bat. It's typical that, sadly, moms and women tend to automatically be a little bit more understanding because they have so much more responsibility personally in their own lives. They tend to be a little bit more understanding of that. But then you get a great leader, an older man who you don't expect to have so much emotional intelligence, and they do, and it's magic. So there's really no perfect box, but it's a level of emotional intelligence, I think, that comes from a good leader, somebody who knows how to develop you, somebody who knows how to support you, and somebody who knows how to encourage you. And with that comes this emotional intelligence that ultimately leads to a safe environment.
You definitely instantly notice the culture or the vibe of a place when mental health is supported. I think there's definitely a positivity. I think there's definitely togetherness and connectedness between either the employer and the employee, or the employees in general. I think for me, what you don't see when that happens is a disconnect and a real sourness within the culture. There's a lot of negativity, a lot of whinging, a lot of even competition, and people putting other people down. I think when mental health is supported, there's definitely a real community feel, and there's people checking in with each other and asking, are you okay? Or there's just a general positive energy in the building or in the place of work. That would be my takeaway from if employers are doing the right thing and supporting mental health, there's definitely an energy that you feel when you walk into a place.
In people's faces, you can see it in their attitudes when they come to work. You can see it in things like UPA. Unplanned absence, when you've got a workplace that's really supportive and encouraging of people's mental health, you have low unplanned absences. You have happy employees because they know that they're not just someone who's doing a job, they're someone who's cared about, they're looked after. They're working for a company who sees more than just what's going on the surface. You actually see what's going on past the facade. You see a broken arm, okay, that bloke's got a broken arm. You can't hold his tools. But to look past the surface and see what's going on inside, I think a company who looks after an employee's mental well-being is certainly a company that's on the right track to retaining staff and really making sure that their people feel valued, because it's beyond the surface. So it's really important to make sure that you are looking after your staff's mental health.
So with that, then when the person as employee feel valued in that sense, as not based on our role, but based because we are human, because mental health and well-being is a human need. For me, they just not value my role, but value me as a person. And because of that, there's a lot of productive or, like good result with good mental health and good well-being or positive well-being. There's productivity and efficiency. There's happiness, right? When the person is happy, it bleeds into their work. They don't cause any negative vibes or mood in the workplace. So I think the individual people, the employee become more productive and become more creative. So I feel like it's also, when I think about mental health and well-being, and when the company or the leaders, the employer, the leaders support support their employee, their members on this aspect. I feel like it's really is hand in hand with what we've been wanting in our organization on diversity and inclusion. Yeah, so for example, in my organization, and I also feel that lately, and I'm not sure if because there's a lot of demand lately, or because of COVID, or because of the technology we have now in the last couple of years or 5 years, there's more demand that is in place for individual, for me as an employee, compared to, I don't know, 10 years ago. What I felt is I have more and more work, that my workload is very full, sometimes beyond on what I can handle. So if I go to my manager and to my leaders, my manager's manager, and say, I needed help because what I have is too much. I think this program is beyond one person can handle. And so if they come and support me and say, okay, what type of support do you need, right? How can we help you with your workload? And if they say that and come to me with that and partner with me for solution, and if I presented solution to them, proposed solution, and they said, okay, we'll figure out how we can have this. For me, they hear me, they hear that, okay, Rose needed help here, or else you're gonna get unhappy, which lead to maybe illnesses or whatever, right? So then they're thinking about that person, not about just a person who's doing the work. So for me, but a lot of it right now is a back and forth, right? Like negotiation. So for me, I'm still treated, or they hear me, but they didn't really hear me. Like whatever they're trying to provide support for me is not for my own well-being, but it's still at the end of the day, it's like what's good for the business instead of what's good for the person. So I know that, so in that aspect, diversity, equity, and inclusion is once you have the diversity, once you have that diverse, every aspect is diverse, not just gender, not just background, but everything diverse in your organization, or even let's talk about smaller aspect here, like team or department. If you have that diversity present in your organization, team, department, then you make sure that everything they need is accessible to them, and not only to few people, but it's accessible. There's fairness in any tools or mental health resources, whatever. Then everybody, that's all this diverse set of individual in that organization, team, and department would feel then included, right? You can't have just diverse and not have equity. Then at the end of the day, we will not have inclusion. Inclusion is the sense of belonging. So if my manager really is, when I come to my manager and say, hey, I need help, and when I say the specific help that align with, it's affecting my mental health or my well-being, my manager come to me and partner with me to find a solution, and I feel valued. I have sense of belonging in this company.
I think there's a lot organizations can do to provide an environment for employees that is not only professionally rewarding, but also, I think, personally satisfactory. For example, in the organization I'm currently with, we have a lot of turnover in administrative positions, and we've found it difficult to keep people in certain positions for more than a year or two. And I think that one of the things that can address that, or that can support the idea of retention, is making sure that people feel heard, making sure that people feel adequately prepared to do their jobs and feel supported in doing their jobs. In addition to things like healthcare and salary and some of the more obvious things that people are concerned about. What kind of growth opportunities are there? If there isn't a growth opportunity, what's my motivation to stay with any particular organization? So these are just the first things that come to mind. Well, I think one of the things that is important is to have not necessarily an open door policy among the upper administration, but also to make it feasible for people to come in and have meetings and talk about what's on their minds, whether that's a concern or whether that's something that really makes people happy about their jobs. So opportunities, both one-on-one and small groups, to discuss, to get together and check in, I think is really important. And this is something that my organization does very well on the departmental level, but it's not necessarily something that transcends to the entire organization. And so I'm mostly thinking right now of that upper levels of the organization, that it's important for us to feel like our concerns are being heard and that steps are being taken to at least address some of the more egregious things that are on people's minds. You know, you might be encouraged to say what you think, but then that information goes directly into a recycling bin. Instead of that, I'd really like to think that organizations will take the time to take their employees' ideas into account and see what can be used to improve the workplace. There's often questions about what can we do differently to improve, and a lot of times the suggestions that might be really workable are not even responded to or acknowledged. And so even if there's that level of, okay, we get it, this is what's going on, I think actually would go a long way to support people's mental health because they would feel like they're making a contribution that is appreciated.
As those who may have experienced depression know, it can be a very isolating experience. So when I was off, I had quite a number of people who would reach out to me from time to time just to see how I was doing, just to check in with me and find out if I was doing okay, if I needed anything, if I wanted to talk. And that was hugely important to me. That created a sense of connection and a sense that I continued to belong to the workplace community. So these elements were key to my recovery: connection, belonging, flexibility, autonomy, feeling heard and valued.
I think for me, when workplace aligns with my core values, the family comes first initiative. When at 5:30 p.m. I'm finishing work, I do not get a call from my boss that I need to accomplish something. Actually, whenever my boss is calling me at 5:30, he's apologizing to me and asking me, do I have 2 minutes still to chat with him? So I think those values are very important to me versus actually getting more pay and getting more money, because that's more important to me. Thank you. I think it's important for the employer to make sure that, you know, they talk about it on daily basis, that we are finishing up work on time, and there's no need for you to really work overtime. There's another day. So whenever I am jumping on the calls with my boss, he always says that it's 5 o'clock, we are wrapping up, and have a great day, enjoy your time with your families.